There's a place in the woods called Aspen Ridge because of all the populous trees which grow there. This is where we're from. We are the Popple People. Welcome to our channel. We're glad you stopped by. In this episode, we'll go through some of the pre-start checklist for this Woodland Mills HM122 portable sawmill. It's important to note that there's no oil or gasoline in this engine when they ship it, so you'll need to add both as part of the pre-start checklist. We started with adding the oil first. There are 2 yellow oil fill holes, which you can see in this clip. The one towards the outside of the saw head seemed easier to get to, so we used that one. Approximately 1.16 quarts of 5W30 synthetic blend oil was used. Now, because it was coming out of a 5-quart jug, a mark was placed on the side of the container so the correct amount of oil was poured. A long funnel was needed and a rag to catch any drips. This does come with an alert system, so the engine won't start if the oil level is low. Next, check that the teeth in the saw blade are pointed toward the log supports. This is the direction the cut is designed to go. Always be sure the teeth are cutting into the wood. There was a note in the manual that sometimes blades get shipped inside out. This one wasn't, so it was just a quick double check for us. Next, we needed to check the blade tension before we could properly set the drive belt tension. We had to turn the T-handle until the thrust bearing was flush, as shown in the diagram. An obvious point to mention here: don't do this with the blade running. The manual recommends removing the spark plug cap for safety. Now that the blade was properly tensioned, we could check the tension on the drive belt. A maximum of 1/4 inch of play is considered acceptable. Ours exceeded that, so it needed tightening. There was just a hair more than 1/4 inch of movement, so the belt needed to be adjusted just a little bit. A 24mm wrench and socket were used to loosen the M16 hex bolt and lock nut first. Next, the M8 bolt in the curved slot was loosened using a 13mm socket. The nut for this one is held in place with an anti-rotation device, so no tool is needed for that part. Next, adjust the curved slot. Tighten and recheck that play again when you're done. Once you've achieved the proper belt tension, make sure both bolts get retightened. Next, the blade tracking needs to be checked. Anytime you're working near the blade, gloves and safety glasses should be worn for your protection. Ours was a hair short, so we needed to adjust the blade forward and out. Loosen both guide holders using a 16mm wrench. Then remove blade tension by turning the T-handle 1 full turn. The bolt was turned counterclockwise to move the blade outward. We did 1/2 a turn using an 18mm wrench. We marked the bolt with a pencil so it was exactly 1/2 a turn. Then snug up the backside. The other side does not get adjusted, per the red label. All adjustments are made on the follower side only. Put proper tension back on the blade by turning the T-handle. Then turn the band wheel so the blade can retract to the adjustments made in the previous step. Measure again, checking both sides. When measuring from the wheel face to the end of the sawtooth, that amount of tooth exposed should be equal on both sides, ideally about 3/8 of an inch. To adjust this, it was putsy and took a long time. Now that the blade is tracking correctly, we can adjust the blade guides. This was also putsy and meticulous, as well as a tight space to work in. To adjust the back of the guide, a feeler gauge was used to adjust between the bearing and the blade. This tool is normally used to check spark plug gap. It worked well here because it's small and space was tight working in this area. A 16mm wrench was also needed to loosen the assembly bolts on both guide holders, allowing the round cylinders to slide in and out freely. The gauge was used to create a 1mm gap between the bearing and the back edge of the saw blade, then retightened to lock this in place. Next, adjust the gap above and below the blade. A 4mm Allen wrench was needed to loosen the guide blocks for the blade so they could slide up and down freely. So if the blade is the peanut butter in a sandwich, you're adjusting the thickness of the bread in this step, which will be 1/2 millimeter. We used 2 pieces of paper that were each 1/2 millimeter thick. These were placed sandwiching the blade, then the guide blocks were placed and the set screws retightened. It's important to take your time making all these blade measurements and adjustments because the blade could come off if you don't. It's worth it in the long run to be thorough now doing these parts of the setup process. As always, if you have questions, email us at thepopplepeople, all one word, @gmail.com, or plop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Stay tuned for our next video where we'll start this baby up. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more straight-to-the-point videos about our journey with this sawmill, please consider subscribing. That way, you can be a Popple People too. We'll catch you next time. Bye.